Welcome to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. You know, the Dutch have got the economic blues. Boo-hoo. Private debt has got them down. The housing bubble is bursting. Bursting, bursting! The economy is contracting. Austerity is biting. And unemployment is rising. But how is this possible when the Dutch current account is positive? The government deficit is smaller and exports are doing well. Something does not add up. We need to bring in Stacy Herbert. Stacy, what the frick is going on over there in the Netherlands?
Well, Max, remember at the beginning of this financial crisis and the economic crisis across Europe, when we needed to bail out Greece and Spain and Italy and Portugal, and all these people were the profligate, bad spending governments of the South. Well, you know, the Netherlands were always the one that were pushing the most for austerity. But it turns out private debt might matter more than government debt in this situation. Deflating housing bubble at heart of Netherlands' economic blues. Household spending has been falling for 3 straight years, and it dropped again 2.4% year on year in the second quarter, dragging the entire economy down with it. So the Dutch economy shrank for the fourth quarter in a row, 0.2%, compared to Portugal, by the way, which is growing.
Okay, so this is a reverse of the wealth effect. People say, you know what, let's blow a real estate bubble, and people will feel wealthier, and they'll go out and spend. But here in the Netherlands, they created a housing bubble. Housing prices are now down, and you've got all this debt, which is now creating huge drag on the economy.
Yes. Actually, house prices are down 21%. 30% of the population is in negative equity because prices are collapsing. Actually, let's look at this data market chart, datamarket.com, and it shows private debt to GDP. And as you can see, from 1990 to 2010, private sector debt to GDP in the Netherlands went from 125% up to about 225% at the end of that chart, which is 2010. Now it's up to 240%. So the highest across the Eurozone. And now we're seeing that though the government, relatively to other nations anyway across Europe, is okay in terms of debt, but here you have the citizen, what used to be known as the citizen, the consumer in the economy, is collapsing under the weight of the debt.
Right. They need to build some of those fancy dikes to help them from being overwhelmed with debt. They need a debt dike. You know, they're good at building dikes. This is a story about the debt in the Netherlands. If you build a nice big debt dike, you can prevent yourself from being overwhelmed with debt. But unfortunately, no country is able to effectively build a debt dike these days, and they're all being overwhelmed with the tsunami of debt.
Well, it's also a whack-a-mole sort of situation because we keep on doing this where this homogenization and there's always one answer alone, that we want everybody to be the same. So at first everybody was like, we all have to be Germany. We all have to export. Forgetting the fact that somebody has to import. If one person's exporting, somebody has to import. Well, here we had in the Netherlands this notion that the housing bubble, all you need is a housing bubble and everything will be fine. And as the FT points out, at the heart of the Netherlands' persistent case of the blues, economists agree, is a slowly deflating housing bubble. Property values in the Netherlands rose as much in the boom years before 2008 as in peripheral European countries like Spain, leaving the country with a mortgage debt load larger than any other in the Eurozone. As I said, it has dropped 21% housing prices since 2008.
Right. Well, you know, this is really another story, which is the importance of private debt in addition to government debt. So a lot of these countries are loaded with government debt, and then the IMF and all these other institutions come in and you have to reform your government debt. But here's a country, as you're pointing out here, that doesn't have the huge government debt problem, but they allow themselves to encumber themselves with huge amounts of private debt. Like the UK, for example, they have a huge government debt, over £1 trillion in government debt. But if you include the bank's debt, they've got, and also the household debt and the corporate debt, they've got almost a 1,000% debt to GDP. So they're one of the most indebted countries in the world.
Yes. And now part of the, speaking of the UK government, they are really involved in forcing housing bubbles. This is their policy. This is their one policy. North Sea oil is gone. All they have is this one thing left, and that's housing bubbles and, of course, banking fraud. But